Thank you. Did anybody notice how Steve said, does anybody want to throw anything at me? Come on up, Matt. And what is he going to use me as a human shield? Okay. I'd like to echo Steve's thanks to all of the Geneva staff. So without Steve, without Paul Boys on the community, without Mike Nunnery, COVESA Mike, used to be Geneva Mike, that doesn't count, Ned. Without Karen's daughter, Lindsay, without this entire team, we wouldn't be here. And as Steve mentioned, Geneva turning into COVESA has been here for a very long time, 15 years. As I was preparing for this deck, I was looking back at all of the different events that we'd done. The first one I attended, I think it was in Dublin, and Detroit, and Paris twice. And I'm still seeing quite a few of the same faces. Some of them look older, some of them have gone gray. Again, thanks, Ned. But Georg served on the board of directors previously. Alwyn Bacanes, who now heads all of software engineering at Volvo Car Company, chatting to him this morning, going, can you remember all of the times that we've had together? But the piece that's really kept it going throughout that is very much this continual drive towards this connected future. And why do we do that? And you may have heard my talks before, but we do that because we drive vehicles on a daily basis. And our families drive vehicles, and our children go to school in vehicles. And the experiences that we have now and in the future are driven by alliances like COVESA. So we should never, ever lose sight. And no matter where you are, building a platform, building the cloud, coming up with the next set of product marketing materials for a future concept, it's always about people. And we should be proud of that. So today, I'm going to talk about the 4 COVESA commitments. So how are we driving the maturity, the adoption of VSS? This common data model that allows all of these different vehicles to talk to the rest of this huge automotive and mobility ecosystem. How are we thinking about forming new groups? What's coming next? And here's the secret. It's not top-down. All of the successful projects we've had within COVESA have always been driven by the members. The member companies have a problem, a challenge. How can we address that in a pre-competitive way through COVESA to get the answer out into the industry? We're going to talk about what does that mean in terms of open collaboration. And then finally, we'll talk about the growth of the buyers and sellers network. Open source is not free. As you know from Sue and others sending out the invoices to renew your membership. Thank you again for all of your contributions. But open source is not free. We still have to test it. We have to validate it. We have to maintain it. We have to identify what we should deprecate. But by sharing that across all of the different member companies, all of the different alliances we partner with, we minimize the overhead of these different pieces of the platform. So again, we as the members can force and accelerate the creation of these differentiating experiences in whatever part of the ecosystem we're in. And then we'll go on to a little bit about the vision for the future. So before I go too far, I should really thank all of our event sponsors. Every time you're in here, you will see that we have the likes of Rightware, Mobis, Digital Auto, Bosch, Renesas, Sonatas, sponsoring different elements of this event. Without them, we would not be drinking the free port this evening. On the other side, registration sponsor, Tuxera. We've got Genesis, ACAS, LG, Sonatas. Again, all critical pieces of putting on this event for all of the different member companies. As well as the event sponsors, we have a number of new members. And this is always the exciting bit within the biannual all members meetings that we're at the moment. At the top of the ecosystem, in many ways, Stellantis are now becoming a member. You saw that from Steve's presentation, but that's huge. That's bringing Fiat, Chrysler, Peugeot, Citroën, all of their different brands into that COVESA ecosystem. And that, again, really talking about some of the adoption of the technologies and what they need from an alliance like COVESA next. But then we have a whole host of different middleware, OSV, hardware, service suppliers that will, again, contribute technically. And similarly, we have Michelin. And Michelin is not just about the restaurants, it's not just about the tires. They're really focused on how do they get access to that connected data for all of the different pieces that they have across their ecosystem. And how will VSS, how will some of the other COVESA open technologies help them going forwards? So let's touch on the 4 commitments. Now first, a commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. And your companies, your organizations have already done that. You've found COVESA. You've interacted with COVESA. You've signed the membership agreements with COVESA. But in reality, as part of that commitment, it's a two-way thing. We commit to offer a safe, open place to experiment and to create some of the most amazing connected vehicle technologies out there. But it's a two-way process. It's about collaboration. It's about community. And it's exciting to see you all here in that mindset of collaboration and working through the hard problems that we've not yet solved. And one of those hard problems that we've been working at for a few years is really VSS, this vehicle signal specification. And it's more than that in many ways. But over the last year, we've had more contributors. If you think about all of these different vehicle signals that you might have from a BMW X5 through to a Ford Super Duty over 8,500-pound truck, there's different signals at different places for the different use cases, the different experiences that those vehicles give. And as our membership increases, as we have more engagement, we get better resolution of the signals that we need, different use cases for the tools that we provide for VSS. And ultimately, that enables VSS as this open COVESA project to deliver more content. But it's more than that. Once we have more content and once it's suitable, we get more adopters. And more adopters in the future will be able to grow the ecosystem of all these different vehicles, different parts of the system of mobility that are able to intercommunicate. But that's really not enough. I'd encourage every single one of you to think about how you could use VSS and how you could get started or even go to the next level. So Paul's going to talk more about that next. Paul Boyes, the community director. But go to the intro sessions for VSS. Attend some of the VSS spotlights and ultimately get engaged in the network. And we'll talk more about how to get engaged in a few slides' time. But it's not just VSS. We've got new member-driven projects, member-driven groups being set up literally every other month. One of the big ones is an app framework for a vehicle app store, open source app store, running on Android open source project. BMW, many other players driving this. This means that there'll be a reference implementation for a non-proprietary, non-commercial app store that would effectively enable OEMs or others to more easily get their apps, get what they need to market. But leveraging the power of the Android development studios, the development suites, not trying to create a completely different ecosystem. But on top of that, we have the data privacy issue. We're describing it as the private cross-OEM compute project. Not the catchiest name. We will have a competition, see if anybody can better that going forwards. But how can we, in the spirit of VSS, in the spirit of an open source app store of the future, start to protect, secure, private, and share that data across different parts of the ecosystem in a way that, again, is more distributed, easier than we have today? We have projects on battery optimization. So tomorrow, Mattis and the business track, Mattis from Ford Motor Company, will be talking about his exciting journey using public charging stations from Cologne in Germany to Porto, where we are now. To steal his thunder, he got down to 3% battery at one point in time. you will see his vehicle and it still has the bugs on the front, so they were not driving slowly the entire way. It's either that or the bugs were very slow. It's one or the other. We're also looking at the common approaches to in-vehicle commerce, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. We've got data. We need to provide services to the customer. We're talking about this open app store. What is that means of monetization? And that monetization may be for the charging infrastructure, the future hydrogen economy, if we go to fuel cells, as well as gas stations today. So we have potential new members looking at COVESA, examining what we do on literally a day-to-day basis on all of our different repositories, thinking about how they complete this ecosystem. But that's not enough. We talk about cars a lot. I drive cars. But if we think of the commercial vehicles in the US and in Europe, with all of the different use cases that they might have, in Ford terms, all of the different upfits, just driving from the airport to this Hilton in Porto, I saw transits with cherry pickers and sprinters that were owned by plumbers, all with these different uses. How do we enable that professional, far wider set of experiences that we might need using this base technology? Now, I do not believe we will end up with COVESA branded snow plows for the Alps, but if we can think of a common platform that makes it easier for all of these people, it's going to, again, open up that ecosystem. And in many ways, this all comes down to data-enabled insights. And we're showing those data-enabled insights in the first ways, again, through EV charging, that electrification challenge that all of the OEMs and their ecosystem of tier ones and other suppliers have. And again, how can we solve the meta problem of, yes, we're going to show that our systems work for the insights we need for electric vehicle charging, but if we solve that, how can we then learn from any other insights, for any other pieces of data that we might be able to collect or standardize as part of VSS? All of those are being driven by our members. COVESA, I almost said Geneva, COVESA has a strong framework for 15 years about how to form those. If you are interested in forming new projects, talk to any of the board, talk to Steve, talk to Paul Boys in the community. But it's not just a matter of the projects that we do within COVESA. If we think of all of the other alliances, I deal with many on a day-to-day basis. We've got standard development organizations, other open projects, ad hoc or other standards bodies, as well as commercial operations. Now, if I think about how those interact today, it's not ideal. Effectively, there's these different pieces of open integrations across some of those alliances, but there's an awful lot of it that go behind, as I would describe it, an adoption firewall. It goes into the proprietary nature of I'm building a product, where there's a lot more integration, and you create an end product. And it's hard to integrate all those pieces. And there's no standard way of integrating all of those pieces. So you've used all the same Lego bricks, but you've built something completely different that's not necessarily compatible with the rest of the industry. So COVESA, with many other alliances, are looking to change that. And we're working actively with Autozar, there'll be news tomorrow on that, Eclipse for the software-defined vehicle, Sophie, many others, Connected Car Consortium, all of these ones that you would expect. And we're looking at how we can openly integrate the output and keep that integration current with all of the different changing pieces of the open ecosystem, so that ultimately we're providing the superset of all of our members across all these alliances a higher starting point so that there's less proprietary integration before it goes into their end products, helping our members, helping those alliance members stay closer to the main line, closer to the existing piece of development. Now, why do I care? Well, it really goes back down to kind of my expectations for an app. I think most people here should have a smartphone by now. We've talked about it for a while. My expectations of an app are that if there's a bug, it's going to be fixed in 24 hours. My expectation from Apple or Google is every 1-2 months, it's adding new features. And that every year I've got this whole new experience. iOS 14 to 15 to 16 and onwards from there. Same with the Android environments. And what they have trained me to do is want the latest, greatest pieces of software, the latest, greatest versions at all points in time. COVESA and COVESA expressing our mindset to the other alliances and looking at how automotive can stay close as ever to that main line, and how we, as the developers, owners, drivers of these different vehicles in the future, will get a better customer experience, one that lives up to the expectations of the rest of our digital lives. But it's more than that. It's not just about the technology. We're here together, and we're talking about this buyers and sellers network. So networking events. You've heard from Steve that we have 1,800 people at CES. We have these COVESA member meetings. We attend many industry events. I lost count of the number of webinars that we've done over the last year. And then we have what we would describe as beachhead events. There's one in June, aligned to the Autotech Detroit, where we'll probably have getting on for 1,000 people at another evening event to socialize, collaborate, make network contacts for business as well as the development we do within COVESA. This evening, we will be going to World of Wine. We will be offered a range of beverages from the water right the way up to the strongest ports. Last night, we were lucky enough to go there, and what we discovered on port is, does anybody know how they make port? Okay, one. You can correct me when I'm wrong. We'll give you a microphone afterwards. So they take really sweet grape juice, and they pretend to ferment it for just 36 hours, and then they mix it with 88% alcohol brandy. They stick it in a bottle for 10 years, and then say it's good for you. We're going to test that this evening, and we'll test it again tomorrow morning. Not drinking tomorrow morning, just really the pounding headaches, but we'll see how that goes. Sorry for those who don't participate in alcoholic beverages. So really, on this commitment, it's not a commitment to the alcoholic beverages. That's the last I'll say about it. It's hard when you import. But it's the maturity and adoption of VSS. If we don't all speak the same technical language, it's going to be really hard to accelerate the development. It's about the formation of all of these different expert groups, these member-driven projects. It's about the intentional and open collaboration between all of our organizations who choose to be COVESA members. And then finally, it has to be about the dollars that drive this, the dollars that drive the enablement of these experiences in our vehicles. So we have a vision for the future that's kind of looking back. So I was going through these slide decks, as I said at the start, and I found one from 2013. This was the Embedded World Session 22, simultaneously leveraging Linux and Android in automotive IVI from 2013. Feels like we should have perfected it 10 years later. We're getting there, but we've got to collaborate more openly. I found a slide for 2016. This has the brand Genevi, almost said COVESA, got it the wrong way around, from Philippe Robin, who many of you will know. Accelerating connected car development. That was only 7 years ago. And then we're here now talking about, in 2023, the Vehicle Signal Specification 3.0. We're making progress in all of these areas, but I know that we can do it faster. I know that we can do it better. And I know that we have to do that for all of our products. Because your expectations and mine just aren't the same as they were in 2013, 2016, even now in 2023, and what we're talking about, what the state of reality is compared with our digital lives. And the ecosystem is expanded more rapidly than ever before. This week, the feds, the Department of Transportation, are talking about cellular V2X and rolling out all of this infrastructure. 40% subsidies, potentially, that they're offering across the US. The EU are doing a similar thing in Europe. China already has cellular V2X. So we've got this continuous expansion of this connected ecosystem. from chargers through the vehicles to all of the different pieces that we would attach to that, to the rest of that connectivity that you need for mobility. Spanning into the cell networks, the cloud hyperscalers, all of these different players, members and contributors. And sometimes I talk to the different people participating in the expert groups, and it's kind of the same as you might have in a large software team. They don't necessarily understand why somebody's asking for something. I might say to Ulf, I really need this. And he's like, but why do you need that? And I was like, I don't want to tell you. But unless the developer, unless the contributor has an understanding of what it could be used for, there's not necessarily that openness. There's not necessarily the data that you might want them to have in order to create it. And I see one of the biggest challenges that we have in automotive at the moment being openness to talk about some of the use cases. So if I think about the next big things, we're still talking about connectivity. It's seen as a differentiator to a lot of OEMs. We're talking about autonomy, again, seen as a differentiator. Electrification, to a certain extent, seen as a differentiator. But unless we can talk about some of these obvious use cases, these obvious themes, epics, whatever we want to describe them as, in the open, and I'm willing to bet we can all guess what they are anyway, and we all kind of inherently know, how do we really ensure that our open collaborative platforms meet the uses of the next generation of challenges that we have within automotive? Now, in good news, I actually see a lot of these conversations happening with COVESA, certainly some within AutoZar, but we need more. We need dreamers in some ways. But above anything, we need communication. And communication's really hard. I hate communicating. I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I'm open to do this because it's technical and I understand the subject, but I'll hate the questions at the end. And if we think about how COVESA tries to enable that communication, we try and make it as easy as possible. So we now have Slack. We have regular meetings. We have Confluence. So we try and meet all of our members on, well, how do you want to get in touch? Because we're spanning so many different time zones. But without that openness to communicate, we're still never going to run at the speed that we need as the membership. So with a lighthearted ending to this, some of the people that I've seen talking in some of the different spheres have really been talking about how, in the future, AI plays a part in COVESA. And I was thinking, well, if AI is going to play a part in the solutions of COVESA, why can't it play a part in the starting points? So I thought, I'm just going to ask it a basic question. Create 5 great future ideas for digital car features. And it came up with personalization. Oh, hang on, we need common languages, data, cloud, all of the pieces that we're delivering in COVESA for that. It came up with V2X. Feels like it's a connected vehicle technology. Came up with augmented reality. So I think it had been watching too much Minority Report, but at the same point, for augmented reality, we're going to have all of these digital features, potentially the open app store, so that you've got apps to support this augmented reality in the future. Charging, we have an expert group, and then biometrics. All of these pieces that even ChatGPT can come up with, free of charge, require our underpinning platforms and require our inter-alliance conversations. So then I got carried away. I'm like, yeah, words, I don't really like words. Let's look at a picture. So I generated a picture of what it thought a all-members meeting in 2033 might look like. This scares me. I'm not sure what this is, but it shows you where we're going. And then I did one final thing. Now, I'm not going to go through this in detail. I think Paul Boyes is on next. So the first thing that he does, he's going to sing it to you. So I asked it to create a song. So we now have the AI-generated COVESA anthem. We'll have a rousing chorus on Thursday. Paul's going to teach it to you in the next one. But on a serious note, this is kind of scary. If this can come up, if Matt, God help us all, can come up with this in 30 seconds when he's supposed to be creating slides, how can we leverage the power of AI, not just in these autonomous systems that we need in our vehicles, but in the way we think and interact. How can we have these autonomous co-pilots helping every single one of our developers, every single one of our product people to get more out of the industry faster? Because we know that our digital competition in other industries are. And if we really want to get to this future, connected autonomous vehicles, with vehicle-to-vehicle communication and digital experiences that keep up and support what we have in our pockets, we have to jump to that next level. So with that, I think we have time for questions. Thank you.
Questions from the audience?
Questions about absolutely anything, from port making right the way through to autonomous.
Thank you. Still first timer here. Question from me is, we see a lot of, so I'm from Amazon Web Services, so one of the cloud hyperscalers. If anyone wants to talk about Amazon Web Services, come to me. We see
Buyers and sellers network, everybody. Sorry.
we do see in the industry a slowly moving, very big trend that you highlighted on Google, making its way toward cars more and more, not just doing the phone projects and stuff with the usual Android car, but probably at some point offering a full car OS, like for free, like they did for smartphones. So is Google part? Sorry, that's going to be a dumb question. Is Google part of the COVESA Alliance, and do we know whether they are using VSS or considering using VSS?
So we should probably answer this together. For a very long time, we've been having discussions with Google. Google attend our events regularly. They have open source implementations. They suck from the open source. So Google are not a member of COVESA.
That's correct.
But at that same point, we have this iterative set of discussions.
Yeah, I think where Google stands today is no, they're not a member yet. They're very, very interested in the dialogue that happens in this community. They attended our all-member meeting in Leipzig last year, and their product team, and they were very interested in the whole notion of how is COVESA establishing a standard in the area of vehicle data. And so they clearly have a very strong interest. Google is not an organization that is quick to join alliances. We've had that conversation. They continue to, and Paul can maybe address this when he gets up a little bit later, but they continue to reach out to us and say, what's the community talking about? What can we as a product team within Google learn from the smart people represented in this room? And so there's clearly a dialogue there. It hasn't turned into a membership yet, but there's clearly a dialogue and an active exchange.
But that's not uncommon. So we often see huge companies that appear from the outside to be incredibly profitable, that attend our events, that use VSS as part of their cloud stack. But just like AWS is not a member yet. We'd love to call you out on that and help you become a member. And that's from Ford as well as COVESA.
We're working on it.
Fantastic. And we've been hearing that, and we will help you. Is there any other questions?
Thank
you. Yeah. Right over here.
You are a member. Thank you.
I've looked at the VSS standard briefly, and I come from, connected car to me means V2V, interoperability between vehicles. That's my background. Is there any discussion with the SAE, like, what is it, 2735 and VSS?
So we're having discussions with many different external consortia. Actually, last week, I think you were there as well. I was at SAE World Congress with other OEMs as well as tier ones talking about what is the future of that software-defined vehicle. And what is the future of the communication messaging, the ontology, all of these different pieces that we need for the data, and how can we drive that in? And at the same point, on the US side, because SAE at this point is US-centric, we're having discussions with US Drive and US Car about how can we do the right thing for these pseudo-standards that are open and continually evolving, but at the same point not necessarily lock them down in a way that the standard that you referenced and other standards might do in the past. So we're really hoping that as COVESA is an open, collaborative, and adopted standard, if I can put it like that, with VSS, where we would love, and we've had this discussion with other people in the Alliance, and CIS's thoughts on how we can go to that next stage. We can achieve something that no one company would. And then how can we not say, that's it, VSS is finished, but continually evolve that to meet the expanding needs of this ecosystem? Steve?
Yeah, I mean, as Matt said, we're engaged with a lot of different organizations, and I think what COVESA, and I don't want to speak for the board directly, but I'm going to speak for the board directly. We really want to get VSS right. And we feel like we need to, we're already past crawling, and we're walking really fast, but we're not running yet. And I think that before we reach out and do V2V and V2X and all these other things, I mean, we're already talking about interfaces to other industry models, like we're going to have an EV charging discussion with OpenADR and you know, insurance and that sort of thing. But I think we want to do VSS right. We're at version 4. It's progressing, and we really want to get it right before we start proliferating it into all different kinds of activities. If there's a pull from those activities, then yeah, absolutely, we'll answer the call. But I think VSS is not just about V2V or V2X or whatever it is. It's about a lot more, and we want to get the core of it right. We want to be running in the right direction. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think as Matt just articulated a little bit ago, our number one commitment is to make VSS right for the industry, and you are the ones that are making it right. Mm-hmm. I'm not. Matt and I aren't going to sit up here and tell you what VSS being right is about. So I think we're going to get there, but we're going to do it right along the way.
We have another question. I think it was 10 rows back was first. Marginally, it's no offense.
There's 2 more questions, and then we need to break for...
Hello, Jacques Charan from Michelin Group. First time to come here. We joined the COVESA Alliance really lastly. My question is about when do you think that we will be able to have a vehicle that is VSS aware, in which I can put a service that can use the VSS signal specification? And I'm asking that to you because you are a Ford member, so you may know when a vehicle would be available with this kind of technology. Are we talking about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
Shall I give that a go?
Go for it.
So this is a really interesting one that I'm not going to answer directly, and you will be disappointed in me personally. I apologize. And that's the interesting piece, that COVESA is here for all of these pre-competitive elements. But because it's pre-competitive, and you could say that there is a competitive advantage with the rollout of these different technologies, we would always leave it to the individual members, the individual OEMs in this case, or the individual people taking a prototype vehicle and using VSS to announce that. Because that is the product. That is stepping over the line of antitrust. And as ever, we're at COVESA, we're at a members meeting, we talk about what is in the open. We never talk about pricing, we never talk about timing, we never talk about product unless it's publicly announced. We only ever really talk about what do we need to go to that next level. And in some ways, because we follow those rules, because it's not about our OEM product, we get further faster in the open than other times. So I'm sorry I didn't answer your question. Somebody else may around a drink, but ultimately it's pre-competitive.
I'll just add one other thing though. There are simulation tools today that are using VSS as if and creating services as if they are working on a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an opportunity on Wednesday night, stop by the Digital Auto Steinbach section, learn about digital.auto as a simulation tool. There's ANSYS has simulation tools. There's other simulation tools. I mean, technology is technology, but really tooling is what results in rollout. And so if you have tools that you want to contribute to COVESA, please do, but there are already some tools that are happening that really simulate that notion of insights coming from data and produced into actual services delivered to the vehicle that are in simulation today.
That's right. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question,
Yeah,
Steve.
one last question.
Thank you. So Emil Dautovich, Remotive Labs. So a startup that's actually part of COVESA. We love collaboration. But the question to you, Matt, is...
Why is it always to me?
Yeah.
Steve, you're
as
wonderful.
an OEM, where do you think the border is between a successful collaboration and when it doesn't work? And I'm thinking back then, Geneva wasn't maybe the most successful when it comes to IVI and sharing stuff. And where's the border between what OEMs want to share and collaborate and what's your own secret sauce?
So and I think that's another really hard question to answer, because there's different types of collaborations. The way Ford or another member would collaborate as part of that COVESA alliance in the open is subtly different from the way we might collaborate with a tier one or a silicon vendor or Ford working with a startup. But no matter what the challenge, I always think about it in three ways. So at the end of it, have I learned something, and is it a compelling problem that has been solved? And secondly, have the people who have done it learned to collaborate, communicate? Have they got everything that they needed to continue that in the future? And then the third piece, which sometimes is the most important, have you got everything that you need in that process so that Ford could work at the speed a startup wants to work? Can we drag 19,000 engineers in my division at the speed of your 9? I'm making it up, I have no idea. And if you answer that compelling problem, product, people, and the process, you generally get to the right results. And exactly the same is true in COVESA. If we set out to create an open Android app store, if we say this is how we're going to collaborate, these are the tools, the processes, this is what we are and aren't going to do, and we get the right people that are willing to talk, you know that we're going to win. If we miss one of those three things out, it's just not going to happen.
Yep.
So with that?
Yep, I think we need to close and invite Paul up to the podium here. And so thank you, Matt. Everybody give a round of applause to Matt.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.